Um, Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Piyush Singh, Counselor, Embassy of India, Berne. I welcome all of you to this webinar on opportunities in the Indian textile sector that the Embassy of India, Berne is organizing today with Swiss Textiles. I would like to especially thank Mr. Peter Flukiger, Director, Swiss Textiles, for enabling this webinar today. India and Switzerland have excellent relations. We share a long history of warm and cordial relations. India attaches priority and significance to its relations with Switzerland. Today, the people of India have taken a solemn resolve to build an Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means a self-reliant India. It merges the local with the global. It ensures India's strengths act as global force multiplier. Policy-based, far-reaching reforms are taking place in India. Red tapeism has been replaced by red carpet. Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, over $20 billion of foreign direct investment has been received in India since April this year. Google and Amazon have announced long-term plans for India. India has jumped from the rank of 134 a few years ago to the rank of 63 on the Ease of Doing Business Index. For the first time this year, India has also entered into world's top 50 most innovative countries in WIPO's Global Innovation Index with a rank of 48. India ranks in the top 15 in indicators such as government online services and research and development intensive global companies. India has outshined in the sub-pillar knowledge diffusion, witnessing a jump of a staggering 13 ranks from 23rd in 2019 to 10th in 2020. Friends, India is a young and aspirational country. It is open and engaging with the world. It provides immense opportunities for further strengthening of India-Switzerland trade and investment ties. The Indian technical textiles segment is estimated as at $16 billion, which is approximately 6% of the $250 billion global technical textiles market. The penetration level of technical textiles is low in India, varying between 5 to 10% against the level of 30 to 70% in developed countries. It is in this context that the National Technical Textiles Mission has been launched by the Government of India, which will run from 2020 till 2024. The mission aims at average growth rate of 15 to 20% per annum, taking the level of domestic market size to $40 to 50 billion by the year 2024. It is to be achieved through market development, market promotion, international technical collaboration, investment promotions, and Make in India initiatives. It also envisions 10% average growth in exports per year up to 2023-24. The mission has been allotted approximately 200 million Swiss francs for its duration of 4 years. Reiterating New India's focus on sustainable development, the National Technical Textiles Mission will also focus on development of biodegradable technical textiles, materials, particularly for agro-textiles, geotextiles, and medical textiles. It will also develop suitable equipment for environmentally sustainable disposal of used technical textiles with emphasis on safe disposal of medical and hygiene waste. Friends, the Indian technical textiles sector provides immense opportunities for collaboration with Swiss companies. This webinar today is taking place under the ambit of the Momentum in India Swiss SMEs program, which is implemented by the Embassy of India, Berne, with the intention of connecting the Swiss and Indian business ecosystems. Today, we will hear presentations from the knowledge partner of MISSP, TNA Consulting, and also the legal and tax partner of MISSP, Rotterdam partner. The Embassy of India Berne is hopeful that the webinar today will be followed by a richer collaboration between India and Switzerland in the field of technical textiles. So with those words, I would like to invite Mr. Peter Flukiger, Director, Swiss Textiles, for making his opening remarks. Thank you. Mr. Flukiger, I would now hand over the screen to you. Welcome.
From my side, in the name of Swiss Textiles, it's an honor and a pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar on opportunities for cooperation in the field of technical textiles between Switzerland and India. And I would like to thank, first and foremost, Dr. Singh and the Embassy of India in Berne for initiating this webinar. As he said, we have, or our two countries have, our two economies have excellent relation, but there remains a huge untapped potential, especially for SMEs, and therefore I am glad that we have this webinar today oriented on SMEs and on technical textiles. India and Switzerland, both countries were severely hit by the corona pandemic. In the first semester of 2020, our exports of textiles, they dropped by nearly 20%, clothing even 35%. And all our members are concerned, so yarn, fabrics, finishing, embroidery, and products, all markets geographically and per sector, so automotive, airlines, transportation in general, home textiles for hotels and restaurants, etc. So how should we cope with this global challenge, with this pandemic? Some countries, they act with protectionism. They try to create new barriers to trade with the aim to protect their local industries. In a globalized world and with globalized supply chain, I think this is the wrong approach. I'm convinced that international cooperation, international openness are more important than ever before. Therefore, I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to discuss this issue. And even though we are in a difficult situation, I believe in Switzerland as a global hub for textile solutions. Let me explain you why. First of all, I believe that our future is textiles. Textile is the new metal, so fibers and fabrics will become more and more important because of their qualities. They have a large surface, low volume. They are easily combinable. They're chemically modifiable. They have a flexible structure and a high degree of porosity. So there's an unlimited potential for application. Dr. Singh mentioned medicine, sustainability, architecture, industry, all those industries or sectors, they will need textiles in the future. In my view, textile can do anything, anywhere, for anybody. And we believe that Swiss Textiles has a customized solution. So it's not only our sector of producing textiles, but it's our sector in cooperation with renowned technical universities we have in Switzerland. We have a strong system of vocational education. We have a close link here in Switzerland with other clusters such as biotech or medtech or microelectronics, and we are really international oriented. Switzerland is a hub, so we import fiber and yarn and fabrics mostly from Asia. Have a high exposure to the European Union and have an export rate of 70%. Within this international orientation, it's of utmost importance that we have open and liberal markets, that we have a fair competition, and we act sustainable. As Mr. Singh mentioned, technical textiles is a growing market, nearly 200 to 250 billion US dollars with an average growth rate of 5% a year. In Europe, there's Italy and Germany, the leading producers, but Switzerland is a niche leader in high-tech products. On a worldwide scale, we have China and for sure India as the global leaders. Let me give you some Swiss examples. On the right-hand side, we have lightweight materials in the transportation sector. So there is a linen composite from a Swiss company with high stability, with which is sustainable because it's from linen, and it's used for Tesla, which you can see in the picture, or in the Formula One sector. In the picture in the middle, you see a knitted building. We have at the ETH Zurich a department, and they knit building to reduce time, to reduce cost, and reduce concrete. And on the left-hand side, also in the field of sustainability, you have a facade out of photovoltaic fabrics, which supports energy efficiency in the urbanized world. So the potential is there, but as you can see on our bilateral trade, the potential is untapped. If you have a look at our bilateral trade, we see that most of the imported products from India are closing. And technical textiles, they represent only 2.5% of the whole trade. On the other hand side, 56% of textiles exported from Switzerland to India are technical textiles. Important is that we see a slightly upward trend, and the potential is huge. What do we need to tap this potential? In my view, there are three things. First of all, we need information. We need information about the markets, about the Swiss market, about the Indian market, how these markets work. Secondly, we need mutual trust. I think especially for SMEs, it's important that they have a partner which they trust on. So information, mutual trust, and as a third point, we need a better framework condition, and therefore we fully support a comprehensive free trade agreement between Switzerland and India. Our association is pushing to conclude and ratify this agreement. We need modern rules of origins, especially in the field of textiles. The rules of origin is very important. We would like to have accumulation possibilities with the European Union so that we have a kind of a triangle, India, EU, Switzerland. And in the field of technical textiles, a last important point which we should have in this agreement is the protection of intellectual property rights. So I hope that today we will increase the level of information. We will surely increase the level of mutual trust, and I hope that our politicians will work on a free trade agreement. And with that, I leave the floor to the next speaker. Thank you so much for your interest and for participation.
Thank you, Mr. Bukiga, for your very encouraging remarks. I mean, on all the 4 points that you mentioned, I can just say that I mean, it's a case of mutual trust that we are here today attending and jointly collaborating this webinar. We will be providing, I hope, ample information during the webinar for further, more detailed discussions with Swiss companies. Again, on EFTA and IPR, we'll be having some good discussion later during this webinar. So with those words, let me now invite the first speaker of this webinar, Mr. Tarun Gupta, partner TNA Consulting, to please make his presentation on overview of the Indian economy amidst COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I just hope that the word COVID crisis gets over soon, and there are encouraging signs, and I'm sure India also we will see some positive light as we have significantly ramped up our testing, and business activities is really up to normal. But let me take a pause and just take you through the structure of the presentation. A big thank you to all our participants for taking time out and joining for this event. as Mr. Fluiker said, sharing of information and trust is critical. So over the next 30-40 minutes, various speakers will try and give you what are the things which are changing in India. Can India be a preferred and a trusted business partner for Switzerland across sectors? And how textiles and technical textiles is critical for India and also for collaboration with Switzerland? And what are the key steps towards that? And I'm also familiar that over the last 6 months, all of us have been deluged by webinars, presentations. So there's a bit of inertia setting in, tiredness. So I'll try to keep it as lively and as easy on the mind as possible. Some wise men said that never let a good crisis go waste. And our history tells us that the major push for reforms, a crisis has been a big trigger. So things are changing in India. Yeah. But before that, for some of our for some of our participants, does the Indian economic setting look like? You have a slide in front of you, but I would start by saying, remember the 4 Ds in India. Of course, we are the largest democracy, 900 odd million people eligible to vote. That may stall things sometimes in decision-making process, but we have common law. That's the most important. Second is demography. Very important. We have one of the youngest countries in the world with a median age of 29. And what it means is that we need to create jobs. We will have 10 million people entering the job market every year annually till 2030. And it's estimated that we need to create 90 million non-farm jobs. So the success of textiles, technical textiles, is imperative because the job intensity in this sector is up to 75 times more, for example, than an automotive sector, or 250 times more than iron and steel sector. Third is diversity. Of course, India, as you move from northern India to southern India, east to west, is more diverse than Europe. And finally, also, let's be cognizant that there is disparity in India. Top 1% controls nearly 60% of the country's wealth. We have third largest number of billionaires. But what's important for you from a business perspective is that even within states in India, we have large disparity in stage of economic development. That disparity could be 10x. In fact, only top 5 states in India account for 70% of our exports. Top 8 states account for 80% of our, top 8 states account for 50% of our GDP. So all these factors are important. And finally, the graph on your right side shows you the disproportionate role of services sector, which is the fact that if we have to create these jobs, we need to get our manufacturing right. And most importantly, our employment intensive manufacturing, textiles, technical textiles, and all the government policies are geared towards it. How does the India's investment climate look like? I think Dr. Singh mentioned that even in the current phase of pandemic, we've been relatively successful in attracting foreign direct investment. He spoke about April to June quarter. Even if we look at Jan to June, first half of 2020, we have almost attracted the same level of foreign direct investment because the macro parameters have not changed. Over the last few years, 50% of our FDI has come in only in the last 5 years, and 90% of that has been in greenfield investments. So this gives you an indication on the attractiveness of India as an FDI destination. Our vision was to be a 5 trillion economy by 2025. I use the word was to be, reason being the current pandemic may move this goalpost by 1 or 2 years. So let me straight away delve into the elephant in the room as to what is the impact the current pandemic will have on India. And before I do that, let me just give you an indication on how India has moved on the ease of doing business ranking. We've been ranked amongst the top 10 improvers for the 3rd consecutive year. And if you see in the Global Innovation Index as well, now we have in top 50. And of course, Switzerland is ranked number 1. So we want to get closer. And this also touches upon an important point of intellectual property, what Mr. Flüger referred to. There is increasing awareness and the legal system to make sure that the intellectual property is well protected in India. We cannot be moving up the innovation charts if our aspect of the whole aspect of intellectual property is not protected. Moving on to see how the COVID has impacted, let's say in the last quarter, we had a significant drop, as the graph indicates. Significant decline, in a way that was expected. When you close a major, we had one of the strictest lockdown, where our whole business activity nearly for the period from the month of April and May was really shut down. And the numbers speak for itself. We had a huge decline in April to June quarter. However, look at some of the other parameters and how the rebooting is happening. Our unemployment rate has fallen. Sharply. You see the graph on your right. Our purchasing manufacturing index has now increased to 52, which means shows more than 50% of the managers see investment happening. Our foreign exchange reserves are very comfortable, over $500 billion. And our external debt is in control. So really, we have the monetary flexibility and leeway should we want to even put out more liquidity measures, more support programs for businesses. What are the other indicators? Look at our goods and service tax collection. It's almost reaching our pre-pandemic level. We have the latest figure for August, about $12 billion. So it has varied from 12 to 14 odd billion dollars, almost there. You look at our transportation, our e-bills system. We used to do close to about 60 million e-way bills. In July, we are touching 50 million. That means the freight is picking up. Passenger vehicle registration, the power demand, in fact, is up on year. So all this shows that as an economy, we are rebooting. That's a huge message that after the strictest lockdown, all these parameters are very encouraging. Okay, now, what is our long-term story? Our long-term story is India can be defined in 4 key parameters. CFID. First is consumption. Dr. Singh mentioned our consumption of technical textiles. It's still very low as per global standards. Overall, if you see our consumption story, India consumption is a private consumption driven market. The consumption accounts for nearly 60% of our GDP. Our private consumption is expected to increase to 3.5 trillion by 2030. Our households, if you look at the top of our pyramid, the 10 million households really have the same purchasing power as Western Europe. And this is the segment which is expected to grow to about 25 million households in the next 5 to 10 years. And that is the consuming class. I'll give you an example of the retail trade. Currently in India, the e-commerce share is just 5%. This is expected to grow to 20% in the next 10 years by 2030. So this takes away a huge challenge for foreign companies, which was the distribution reach. Today, one of the largest e-commerce players, they reach across 99% of the Indian postal codes. So first, its consumption story remains intact. Second is formalization. I know it's a very information heavy graph, but 2 or 3 key points there. Number one, we have large number of enterprises in India. We have 75 million enterprises, which is nearly 3 times the number of enterprises than you have in the US, which is 8 times our economy. However, what we need in India are larger number of large enterprises above $500 million. They are currently 600 as per McKinsey report. Then we need more mid-sized enterprises, which are between 40 million to $500 million. We need to double that number to 10,000. Now, when you have such companies coming up, they are more productive. They invest more they have more access to capital. They invest in modern machinery. And there is also more sanctity to contract, more trust factor. And we have laws to support that. First time over the last few years, we have this insolvency and bankruptcy code where we had over 900 companies being liquidated. So there is more sanctity of contract. That is very, very critical. And that was one of the challenge for foreign companies when they looked for partners, sanctity of contract. Of course, the other aspect is we need to improve our tax to GDP ratio, which is currently about 17%, which is even half that of Brazil. So we need to bring in companies into the formal sector. Third is infrastructure. Again, this is one area which government spending will really drive the whole rebooting of the Indian economy. I take a couple of examples. From a business perspective, we need to reduce our logistics cost. As simple as that. Today, our logistics cost is 14%. We need to get it down to 10% of our GDP. In the next 5 years, the total number of highways built, total number of highway length in India would be 200,000 kilometers, of which half of it would have been built in the last 10 years. And why this is relevant is that for example, our truck speed is currently 35 to 40 kilometers per hour. That needs to go up. Our freight corridors of railways, that speed needs to go up. And all this is, for example, power cost. We need to reduce our power cost by 20 to 25%. All this is geared towards making manufacturing more competitive. Final of CFID is digitization. Here, India, I'm proud to say, is one of the leaders. And you have game changers. We have over 1 billion people on biometrics, 400 million new accounts opened. So the question is, how is it relevant to me as a foreign company? It is relevant, reason being you have more people coming into financial inclusion, more potential buyers. And if you are manufacturing, India is taking a leap in servicification of manufacturing. And as automotive sector, a large user of technical textile, advanced manufacturing, large user of technical textile, food processing, the packaging segment, all these are large users of technical textiles. And what we have, this digitization, is enabling mainly on the reason that we have some of the lowest data prices and largest number of internet users. So CFID, consumption, infrastructure, formalization, and digitization. Moving on, corporate tax rates. This was again a challenge for a lot of companies. And now I'm proud to say that our corporate tax rate are some of the most competitive. So if you're setting up new manufacturing, you're looking at effective tax rate of 17%. Then another initiative which we have done for certain sectors like pharmaceuticals and electronics is production linked incentives. And for technical textiles, we are also looking at certain types of capital subsidies, which my fellow speaker will talk about in later presentation. I spoke about logistics, so I will skip it. But I will do mention that we now, across all states, we have one uniform taxation. And this is bringing about efficiency in size of warehouses. Earlier, our warehouses used to be 5,000 square meters. Now they're 50,000 square meters. Third is cost of compliance. I must say our compliance cost still remains work in progress. We have done a lot of effort. You can see that, but we still need to put in a lot of effort to reduce our compliance cost. The three key challenges which remain in India is cost of compliance, cost of capital, and cost of land. Okay. Capital, we have done some liquidity measures which have given access. But as I mentioned in my earlier slide, we do have more financial power, flexibility to even give more of these packages towards our companies as they come out of this pandemic. Land and labor. We have, our legal speakers will talk about it, but we have a host of labor laws, some 250 odd labor laws, but all the central labor laws, we are putting it into 4 codes. And land cost traditionally has been expensive in India as a part of project cost. But now we have states which have done GIS mapping. It is estimated that 2 million square meters of industrial land across these various industrial clusters, as you see, is ready for possession. And now what we need to do is we need to make sure that not only it's plug and play, but the cost of land is reduced as part of the project cost. With that, I come to the end of my presentation where I give you an example of some of the marquee names which are present in India and we would love to see more Swiss companies present. And I'd be happy to take any questions at the end of my presentation. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience of listening. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for presenting a very comprehensive and understandable picture of New India and its various features, which provide complementarities for India and Swiss to collaborate, and also in the sector of technical textiles. So, which brings me to the next component of our webinar today, which is a presentation on opportunities in the Indian technical textile sector. I would invite Mr. Ashwin Merchant, partner at TNA Consulting, the knowledge partner from MISSP.
Good afternoon or good morning, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are. Before I start my presentation, I would just like to make a point here. Mr. Flukiger gave us a very interesting presentation where he presented data and statistics. Just for differentiation, from the Swiss perspective, the technical textile market is based more on material and technology segmentation. From the Indian perspective, and we always do it differently, the technical textile sector is divided as per 12 sub-segments based on application. So you have agrotech, buildtech, cloth-tech, geotech, home-tech, indutech, meditech, mobile-tech, eco-tech, pack-tech, pro-tech, sport-tech, too many techs. But basically bear in mind that some of the data will vary from what we saw before and what I am going to show. So let's proceed. The Indian technical textiles market and the global textile market. A global consumption of technical textiles is led by the USA with 23% and Western Europe with 22%. Where does India stand? 4 to 5%. As Dr. Singh mentioned, a very small consumption so far. But it is estimated that going into the future, the Asia Pacific region will show the most growth, which will account for about nearly 30% of the market, with China and India leading the pack. So the Indian per capita consumption is bound to increase, more so because it will be based on the increase in the end user industries. Tarun mentioned a few of them: packaging industry, automotive industry, infrastructure. Talking of infrastructure, Tarun mentioned the national infrastructure pipeline, $1.3 million US. Now from that pipeline, if you take just 4 sectors: roads, railways, irrigation, and rural infrastructure. Combined together, these 4 sectors will consume nearly half the $1.3 million, or put around $630 billion. And why do I mention this? Because these are sectors which will use a lot of technical textiles. Yokotech, geotech, buildtech, all these will come into play. On the other hand, Tarun also mentioned agriculture. Now, India is a global player in the agricultural market. We are leading in a lot of crops like cereals, rice, wheat, fruits, vegetables. We are number 1, 2, 3. But the government is promoting food processing industry and exports from there. So to build this value chain, agrotech will again come into play. So basic message from this slide is that although there is a low consumption, but with the increase in the end user industries and government investment in infrastructure, there will be an increase in consumption also. Segmentation. As you see from both the graphs, percentage share and value. Packtech is the largest segment, but Packtech is a low value, low technology segment. On the other hand, Indutech or industrial technology is in sync with the Indian economy. The growth of the Indian economy based on industrialization will make the Indutech grow. The same way, if you look at the home tech and the mobile tech segments, the higher consumption will show more demand for homes using fire retardant fabrics, etc. The automotive sector will come into play out here. Among the young generation, sport tech will play an important part. Also, that the government is promoting sports infrastructure. We are a cricket crazy country. We want to build stadiums everywhere. Artificial turf, that's technical textiles. And when you look at the middle graph, the export and imports. As far as exports are concerned, India was in rank 13th as an exporter of textile products in the world. But again, these are mostly low-tech, pack-tech products. As far as imports go, we import nearly 1.4% of the global imports. Key takeaway message from this slide, that although low value, low tech, pack tech segment dominates right now, there is ample opportunity in the high value, high tech segments. The next slide will confirm this. See, basically, India is a net importer of technical textiles, wherein technology intensive products are imported to a large extent. And the high focus on pack tech, they're basically commodity products like jute carpet backing, tarpaulin, surgical dressings, is because these products require very low investments, and at the same time, India lacks high-tech specialty fibers. Talking of specialty fibers, the imports of certain specialty products like fire retardant fibers and aramids are actually 90% of consumption. So here again, technology transfer or FDI in technology-intensive products for manufacturing in India is an option where foreign firms, Swiss firms, can utilize the inherent strength of the Indian textile manufacturing industry and compete in the domestic market with local price points, as well as use India as a hub for third country exports. Key message from here, imports of high value technology segments will keep increasing in the midterm, and slowly the pack tech segment will become less and less. Manufacturing clusters. Manufacturing in this sector is mostly dominated by either SMEs and large domestic players and MNCs. There's also what we call the unorganized sector. The SMEs in the unorganized sector mostly use low technology, low value products, whereas the MNCs and the large players are in the organized sector are using more high-tech, high-value products. As you can see from the graph, there's a strong concentration in western and southern India. This is basically because of low proximity to raw materials like cotton, as also a concentration of spinning and weaving mills around these areas. Besides these clusters, do keep in mind that there are 8 centers of excellence focused on technical textiles, as well as special textile parks, which are in and around these clusters. And when you look at the states, Gujarat contributes nearly 25% to the market. There are about 800 units involved in manufacturing all the 12 subsectors I mentioned. Maharashtra has 4 of the country's centers of excellence for technical textiles, whereas Tamil Nadu is a front runner for Meditech, Sporttech, and Geotech. In fact, the state has developed textile parks dedicated exclusively to technical textiles. Opportunities. Well, there are a lot of opportunities I show on this graph, but let me speak of 2 examples based on the actual present situation in India. The first example, how unfortunate, is COVID-19. On the 1st of March 2020, manufacturing of PPE in India was at 0. I say 0. 2 months thereafter, ending 31st of May 2020, production grew 56 times and India was manufacturing 450,000 units per day. Today, it is nearly touching 500,000. So it seems that overnight, a new industry using technical textiles worth about $930 million sprung up out of nowhere. And it is projected that by next year, it might even grow up to $1.4 billion. The Indian Army, 1.4 million strong, the second largest in the world, is one of the largest consumers of technical textiles, especially Pro-Tech. And why is this? Well, a little known fact is that 90% of casualties suffered by the soldiers in the high altitude Himalayan region is mainly due to adverse climatic conditions and not combat. That is why between 1984 and 2018, the Indian government spent $1 billion procuring special clothing and mountaineering equipment. When I say special clothing, you refer to that as extreme cold climate clothing, or ECC, which accounts for nearly 44% of the Indian Pro-Tech market. Many of these are very single-time issue, what you call products, such as jackets, wind cheaters, waistcoats, trousers, caps, gloves, rucksacks, socks, high-altitude pulmonary edema bags. These are all disposable, they're not to be reused again. That means there is a constant and regular repeat order for all these items. And at present, the Indian Army imports nearly 50% of ECC As per the official data, the Indian Army bought nearly 42,000 suits in 2019, and that number is set to increase this year. Every year, India spends about $105 million only on extreme climate clothing. And this is where Switzerland is a major provider of winter gear, which includes trousers, jackets, and gloves. Besides the extreme clothing, climate clothing, the Indian Army Corps of Engineers and the Borders Road Organization also are large consumers of geotextiles. Especially with the infrastructure being built all along the borders and the northeast region, this is a very big segment. And before I move to the next slide, let's not forget the automotive industry. Tarun already mentioned it. By 2026, India will be the world's third largest automotive market. We manufacture 26 million vehicles every year, out of which 4.7 million vehicles are exported. Now, to meet the local and foreign safety compliances, the use of airbags, fire retardant interior fabrics, floor mats, and seat belts is also increasing, all technical textiles. The key takeaway from this slide is that these are opportunities purely for domestic consumption. But once a manufacturing base is really established in the country, exports will be the next step, and India could slowly join the value chain as a sourcing hub for technical textiles, high value. Growth drivers. Well, you have two sorts of growth drivers, consumption and manufacturing. When you look at the consumption side, India's gross national disposable income grew 11.2% in 2017-18. This is basically riding on the dividend demographics of the younger population, high spending capacity, and willingness to adapt to new high-tech products. When it comes to hygiene products, baby and adult diapers, sanitary napkins are becoming more affordable, and again, big market for technical textiles. Functional technical textile products also drive consumers to adapt to new products because of better quality and better product life cycle. For example, in sport tech, when you think of your sneakers, it's again technical textiles. On the government side, they're constantly making the use of technical textiles mandatory for certain applications and industries. That is also promoting the use of technical textiles. And of course, social media, as again Tarun mentioned, we are one of the most digitalized nation in the world. It is adding to the evaluation of modern products with technical textiles by the younger generation. When it comes to manufacturing, India has always been a textile manufacturing country with an abundance of raw materials, not only natural fibers, synthetic fibers, but also chemicals for processing. We already spoke about the growth of end user industries and import substitution, and of course, availability of the young and absolute affordable manpower. Well, that is again the demographic dividend. Advantages. What are the advantages? Infrastructure. The Textiles Ministry has actually sanctioned 59 special integrated textile parks, out of which 22 have been completed, and the rest are under various stages of implementation. So this will be really a huge infrastructural boost for the manufacturing of textiles. And here what I've mentioned of textile parks which are focused on technical textiles, and this will also increase once the new parks come into operation. When you look on the right-hand side of the manufacturing hub, the cost of power in India is comparable to Bangladesh and Vietnam, which are two of India's biggest competitors in the textile sector. But keep in mind also that many Indian states offer additional subsidies for power. Lending rates in India are a bit on the higher side as compared to China and Vietnam. But with government support and incentives available, the effective cost of capital is pretty comparable. SWOT analysis. Well, most of the things are already mentioned on the graph, but let's look at the strength. Basic strength is that India has been a traditional textile manufacturing country since decades, and we have an inherent strong industry and value chain which can be exploited for technical textiles. When it comes to weaknesses, I look at right at the top, it's on import of textile machinery. Well, this is a plus point for Switzerland, because most Swiss members from the textile machinery group are already present in India and doing very, very well. What our weaknesses otherwise are basically lack of specialty fabrics and efficient technology to produce high-tech value technical textiles. And this remains a constant hurdle. Another weakness is the absence of regulations and standards for technical textile use, especially in infrastructure and construction. Under opportunities, I would stress that besides defense, which I already spoke about, other institutional buyers who come into consideration are the Indian Railways and the large hospital chains, government and private. The healthcare industry in India is booming, especially the healthcare service industry, and this is again where technical textiles can play a large role. Under threats, India has to be competitive on the international stage, and domestic manufacturers have to invest in R&D, not only to innovate, but also develop high-value products. This will basically place India in the center of sourcing of the global value chain. Key takeaway from this, since the technical textile industry in India is mostly SME sector focused, it needs international exposure and technology adaptation, as well as the introduction of new products in the domestic market. Government missions. Well, Dr. Singh did half my work for me. He already gave most of this information. But basically, you notice that between the first mission, which was the technology mission on technical textiles, TMTT, which ended in 2017, there was no official mission for 3 years. However, in this year's budget, the finance minister allocated $212 million towards the new National Technical Textiles Mission, or the NTTM. Here I can mention a few points, which is basically the challenge out here is the high capital requirement to set up large capacities for manufacturing technical textiles. So incentives for R&D would definitely help go a long way in promoting indigenous research and promoting capacity building in the technical textile sector domestically. Also, the awareness of the benefits of technical textile end products, such as safety, hygiene, better product life cycle, will lead to a slow but higher adaptation of these products, in which once it becomes more and more consumed, the prices will come down, as has been the case of hygiene products, and the market will develop by itself very sustainably. When I look at export promotion, between 2014-2019, India's exports grew at a compounded annual growth rate of 6.5% to reach $2 billion. So with the setting up of the proposed Export Promotion Council for Technical Textiles, it should not be so difficult to reach the goal of 10% compounded annual growth rate by 2024. And as far as skill development goes, besides the skill development, the government of India is also considering setting up various entrepreneurship development institutes for technical textiles, and is talking to different institutes in this regard. This could be, it's not only skill development, but also business development within the technical textiles field. Other government schemes, I've listed a few out here. The government actually identified separate 207 harmonized system nomenclature codes purely for the technical textiles sector. This is going to help the government to identify the gaps in the sector, and which need to be addressed, especially for the manufacturing and exports, as well as for import substitution under the Make in India initiative. The Northeast region, or the Seven Sisters region as we call it, is a focus area for the government to build infrastructure, especially rail, road and air connectivity, and now more so from the military perspective. Irrigation projects in this area are also another thrust area. And all this should again promote technical textiles, so geotech, buildtech, ecotech. You look at, over and above the special integrated textile parks which I mentioned and the centers of excellence, the government is actually implementing 9 special incubation centers for technical textiles. This will give another fillip to the technical textile sector. And lastly, Samarth. Samarth is a flagship skill development scheme, which is in continuation of the scheme I already mentioned in the previous slide. And the government has sanctioned an outlay of $173 million towards this. International trade agreements. Well, these are trade agreements purely related to the textile-related field in general, not specific to technical textiles. But when you look at the map, you see it's a bit lopsided. Most of the agreements are in Asia, Southeast Asia, Far East. There are only 2 on the other side of the world, both in LATAM countries. What is missing are the free trade agreements with major markets like the US and Europe, the EU. This is what puts India in a disadvantageous position. Also considering that on the eastern side, some of the countries like Singapore and Malaysia are partners in multiple agreements. And depending on what is the best route, which is most favorable, they can go through either the ASEAN or the individual FTA route to take advantage of the situation. So the Indian government has been actually in the last few years been revisiting a lot of these FTAs because they feel that they're, to a certain extent, India is at a disadvantage. Mr. Flukiger already mentioned the India-EFTA FTA, which was launched in 2008 and still not seen the light of day. In fact, just by sheer coincidence, the day before yesterday, the Swiss Indian Chamber of Commerce had their annual general meeting where the panel discussion was on the India-EFTA FTA, which presence of Federal Councillor Mr. Yuli Maurer and a lot of other high-ranking personalities, including the new ambassador of India to Switzerland. I think maybe Dr. Singh can dwell on that in his closing remarks. Sustainability. Well, there is an emerging trend in India since the beginning of the century on organic farming. Now, in fact, Sikkim in North India is the only 100% certified organic state in the world. It has 76,000 hectares of cultivable land, fully organic as of 2015. India boasts one of the highest numbers of organic farmers at 800,000, or 30% of the world's organic producers. When you look at the map, you see India is the largest producer. But look on the left-hand side, Madhya Pradesh. It is actually number 2 in the world, even before China. You see the next slide when I show it to you. But talking of sustainability, India has its own Indian standard for organic textiles, the ISOT, which is developed under the National Program for Organic Production, run by the Department of Commerce or the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This program covers the cultivation and production of organic fibers, manufacturing, processing, packaging, labeling, and distribution of organic textiles. And this could include fibers, yarns, fabrics, made-up, and garments, including textile products. But now, before I come to the next slide, it's about India's organic story and the Swiss connection to it. See, before India went down the organic path in, like I said, beginning of the century, already 10 years earlier, 1991, a Swiss company based out of a small city called Rotkreuz outside of Lucerne began operations in this country. You see what it says. In fact, they not only supply co-op, but they also have very well-known brands such as Mahmoud, Galeries Lafayette from Paris, Jerry Weber from Germany, and the Greenpeace movement. What is not known is also that the same time that Remai started in India, there was another Swiss organic brand which was involved around the same time. That is the t-shirt brand Switcher, which unfortunately went into liquidation 4 years back. But Switcher also started in the late 80s, early 90s. 100% production of organic knitwear was completely made in Tirupur, what we refer to as the t-shirt capital of the world. Switcher had multiple certifications like Organic Cotton, Fairwear Foundation, Fair Trade, Max Havelaar, Yokotex 100. They even did a lot of CSR before it became trendy and famous. They had a school with 800 students, they ran a hospital, and even supplied tankers of drinking water to Tirupur every day, where in those days it was claimed that if you look in the drainage in Tirupur, you could see the fashion colors of next year. So you see, this was a Swiss connect in India's sustainability. And now I come to my last slide. This is the marquee names of technical textiles in India. And among all these names, there are 3 Swiss brands, Haiku, Schürrle, and Cephar. For Cephar, Mr. Flukiger already gave us an example of the solar composite facade. It has been present in India since the 1980s. They were selling bolting cloth those days through an agent. Today they have their own subsidiary in India, just outside of Bombay, as does Schürrle. Haiku is a new entrant. 7 years back, they entered India with an agent called Intexo Biochem. They have recently launched their Haiku Viro block in the face of COVID-19. that has been effectively tested, and they've partnered with some of India's leading brands like D-Decor, where Shah Rukh Khan and his wife are the brand ambassadors, as also suiting brands like Arvind, Donier, and OCM. And with this, I end my presentation. My last message before my takeaway message is, India has untapped potential. SWIFT's participation is already here in the country, but it can be increased, especially in the high-tech, high-value products. Hopefully, MISSP can be a partner in this development. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Over to you, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Merchant. Thank you for building on Mr. Gupta's presentation and giving us a broad overview and detailed information also about the opportunities in the Indian technical textile sector for Swiss companies, Swiss Textiles. With that, I come to the last section of our webinar today, which deals with the legal and tax perspective in an overall sense, as well as in the sense of technical textiles. So we have with us the legal and tax team of MISSP. May I invite Kritika Arora and Mr. Gaurav Makijani from Northern Partner to make the presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the wonderful insights that we received from everybody, especially from Mr. Flukiger. Our government actually also resonates with the fact that we shouldn't have a protectionist tendency. So when we talk about self-reliance, when we talk about Atmanirbhar, this does not mean that we have, we will go ahead with an isolationist or a protectionist tendency, which is also evident from the fact, as was already pointed out by my co-speakers, that FDI has really seen a boom in the Indian sector. Now, the aim of our presentation over here is to take you through the legal and tax framework and how India has actually been provided an impetus for industries to enter into the Indian market. I will take you through the legal slides, and then my tax colleague Gaurav Makijani would be walking you through the tax framework. Now, the slide that you have in front of you gives you an overview of the entry options in India for any foreign investor, for any foreign entity when they're looking into entering into the Indian market. There are various channels through which you can do it. It is very important to have an in-depth analysis to know what is the objective over here, and then accordingly have an incorporation strategy in place. For example, the slide that you have in front of you talks about having a presence in the Indian market through a licensor office, a project office, a branch office, or in the form of an incorporated entity, which can be a wholly owned subsidiary or a joint venture. Now, the pros and cons of each of these entry options needs to be evaluated well in advance, because along with it comes embedded the kind of compliances that you would be required to undertake, the kind of activities that can be performed. For example, if you have a wholly owned subsidiary, then you have a full business scope. Whereas if you have a licensor office in India, then you're only restricted to performing limited activities. So as a first step, it's very important to have this analysis undertaken. Also in line with what the FDI conditions, the FDI policy of India is evolving. It may have some conditions embedded depending on the sector that you're looking to invest in. So it's important to have an in-depth analysis of that. Now, in the next slide, we just walk you through some of the important legal provisions, some of the important legal acts that one needs to be mindful of. When you're incorporating an entity, it's now a centralized and a digital process. Fast track incorporation is very much a possibility now, where we have seen companies getting incorporated in 2 or 3 days, subject to, of course, having all your documentation in place. So you can get an incorporation certificate in anything less than 1 week. Your tax registrations can happen simultaneously. So the process is now quite seamless. Everything is paperless. Everything is online, and the Indian economy is really coming up to speed in having incorporation assistance being provided. Now, talking about IPR laws, We are compliant. The legal framework, of course, we have a myriad of intellectual property laws in India. We are ensuring compliance with the TRIPS, with the Agreement on Trade-related Intellectual Property Rights. This ensures that there are constant amendments that are being introduced to the legislations. For example, we have a robust Trademarks Act, wherein the NICE classification of goods and services is provided for. We also have unconventional marks getting trademark registrations done. And we have a strong copyright law, we have a strong Patents Act law, we have a strong Designs Act of 2000, which protects industrial designs. And of course, other than that, since it is a common law system, we are constantly seeing that judgments by courts are constantly, protecting all the IPRs. So this is an ever-evolving, ever-growing area, of course, coupled with the fact, and I wouldn't take much time on that, but the free trade agreement is already being in talks. A major aspect of it also relates to protection in IPRs, where there are some, ongoing discussions between India and Switzerland on, say, for example, rule of origin or balancing of favorable patents vis-a-vis the generic products. So this is something that hopefully should see the light of the day soon. Now, talking about enforcement, recognition of foreign judgments is possible in India, but there are some procedural formalities that need to be undertaken. We have a strong and, of course, a very advanced Arbitration and Conciliation Act, and we have modern institutions available for any kind of dispute resolution. We have transparent and comprehensible judgments all available on public forums. So anybody who wants to understand and delve into how a particular interpretation may be taken can take assistance of these judgments. Now, talking about labor laws, Mr. Gupta already mentioned that we have a very wide arena of labor laws. However, the government is cognizant of that, and they are taking constant steps to standardize and codify these laws. And very soon, we are expecting that codification into 4 categories, that is the industrial relations, wages, safety, and social security, would be effected and implemented. And of course, we are seeing that a lot of ease of compliance measures are being taken, especially in the wake of COVID-19, where the government has been giving constant relaxations, constant extensions of timelines and deadlines in order to ensure that business continuity is ensured. So with this, the underlying principle is that in terms of the legal framework, there are constant impetus that are being given. Foreign entities which are entering into the Indian market are finding it easier to have a strong base in India, are seeing laws that are, at par with how the global laws are in place. So this is it from the legal side. Now over to you, Gaurav, to take them through the tax updates. Thank you.
So from tax perspective, basically, there are 2 types of taxation in India. One is the direct tax, which is the tax on income, and other is the indirect tax, which is nothing but the tax on consumption side. So from direct tax perspective, there are 4 things or 4 limbs attached to it. One is the local income tax law. Now, from foreign investors' perspective, there are tax treaties which India has signed with over 90 countries, including Switzerland. So once you are determining tax implication on any transaction, you have to read your domestic tax law with the double taxation avoidance agreement or the tax treaties, which we will discuss in our later side in detail. And India also has a transfer pricing rules, local transfer pricing rules, and there are 3-tier documentation system requirement, which means that you have to prepare a master file, you have to prepare a local file. Also, there are some country by country regulations reporting requirement, which are mandated by the OECD BEPS mechanism. Now, India recently has also introduced the equalization levy, which is the India's digital tax. And from 1st April 2020, any non-resident who is supplying any goods, which is online sale of goods or online provision of any services using any electronic facility or platform, is also required to pay a digital tax of 2% in India. It's more similar to what EU nations have already passed. but it is more wider in scope. So any non-resident making investment in India and using modern means of communication like SAP, ordering through SAP, etc., they need to be mindful of this new law. From indirect tax perspective, you have to see that there is a custom law. Whenever you import any goods from outside India into India, there is a custom duty implications, and then there are foreign trade policy which provides a mechanism for duty drawback and other incentive scheme for exports. Apart from this, India also have a goods and service tax, which is nothing but the Indian VAT. As far as corporate tax rates are concerned, as Mr. Gupta already talked about in brief in his earlier presentation, now the base corporate tax rate have been reduced to 22%. However, for manufacturing entity, the rates are as low as 15%. This means that in terms of Asia Pacific countries, India is now more competitive, and it has it gives you an opportunity to plan your investment accordingly. As far as interest on foreign currency loan is concerned, India applies 5% rate on any foreign currency loan which is made to any Indian corporate. Also, very recently, India has introduced a concept of faceless assessment, wherein tax authority, while taking care of the tax audit proceeding, there will be all faceless or e-assessment proceeding. There will be no personal hearing. This will reduce the red tapeism and will increase the transparency in all the dealings with the tax authority. Further, to reduce the tax litigation, India has a concept of advance ruling, where any taxpayer, if they want clarity on their tax implication, they can approach the concerned authority for any advance ruling on their tax transaction. They also have a concept of advance pricing agreement, which means that if you are entering into a transaction with your related party and there is a transfer pricing implication, you can approach the authority and ask for the price at which they need to enter into transaction, so that they don't have any further litigation in transfer pricing aspect. Also, since textile industry is very labor intensive and a lot of employment generation happens there, so India has a concept or provides an incentive for additional employment generation, which provides that if you pay euro 100 salary to any employee, then you get euro 90 over and above the books which you have already incurred. So you get, in fact, euro 190 as a tax deduction. Now, coming on to the India-Switzerland tax treaty, basically the objective of any tax treaty is to provide relief from double taxation, and it allocates the rights to the to tax any particular transaction. And if you have any multinational companies are having global transaction, so it means that if any company in Switzerland is having a transaction with an Indian company and earning income from India, they would be subject to tax both in Switzerland as well as in India. And if you don't have a tax treaty with India and Switzerland, that means that you end up paying taxes in both countries. But because of this India-Switzerland tax treaty, you have rules that certain rights would be there with Switzerland and certain rights would be there with India to tax a particular income. Now, if a particular transaction is taxable in both Switzerland and India, then there are mechanisms to eliminate the double taxation. And then one of the countries, which is mainly the resident country, which is, if for a Switzerland investor would be Switzerland, then it will provide a tax credit for all the taxes which you have paid in India. Therefore, if everything is agreed in advance, even if there is a change in tax law in future by India, the foreign investor, the Switzerland investor, would have a tax certainty. Now, talking about the salient future features of the India-Switzerland tax treaty, it provides that any business profit would be taxable in India only if you have a permanent establishment in India, which is nothing but a physical presence. So any Switzerland company who is carrying out its business from India would be taxable in India only if you have a fixed establishment in India, or if you have an agent in India who is totally dependent on you and who is concluding contracts on your behalf, or if you are providing services in India for more than a specified threshold. Now, India-Switzerland tax treaty also provide for a beneficial rate. This means that if Indian domestic tax law provide for a passive income tax rate of say 15% or 20% in case of interest, but India tax treaty normally provides for a passive taxability of 10%. So it means that the taxability rate would be restricted to 10%. For example, if you pay a loan, you are providing a loan to any Indian entity, or you are taking a dividend out of India, then the tax rates are 20%. But because of India-Switzerland tax treaty, the tax rate get reduced or restricted to 10% only. Now, India also have, the treaty also have this elimination of double taxation and non-discrimination clause. This means that there will be no discrimination by the Indian government as far as taxation is concerned vis-a-vis the Indian resident. So the rules for the burdensome rules would be same for the Switzerland entity and the Indian entity. Also, they provide a unique clause wherein it says that if there is a capital gain taxation in India, then in that case, whatever taxes you pay in Switzerland, that would be the Indian authority will allow a credit for that taxes paid in Switzerland in India. Now, it also has a dual tiebreaker rule in case of dual residency. For a Switzerland investor, this would mean that there could be a case wherein a tax authority in Switzerland alleged that you have a residency in Switzerland, and also in Indian Income Tax Authority alleged that you have a residency in India. This would mean that your entire worldwide income will get taxed in Switzerland as well as in India. Because of this particular clause, the tiebreaker clause, these two authorities would decide as per the treaty that to which country actually the residency lies. Therefore, you don't have to pay taxes on your worldwide income in both the countries. And therefore, it also has this mutual agreement procedures clause in the tax treaty, wherein if the conflicts are not solved by taxpayer with the Indian tax authority, then the taxpayer can approach the Switzerland tax authority as well and ask them to directly coordinate with Indian tax authority to resolve any issue as per the tax treaty, so that both the tax resident has to pay the fair taxation in both the jurisdiction. So both the authority will sit together and then determine what is the actual tax liability in India as well as in Switzerland. So that was it from my side. I'll hand over to Dr. Singh now.
Thank you, for putting for bringing the legal and tax perspective to this whole session. Let me now move on to the question and answer session. There is certainly a question on after TEPA, which I'll take subsequently. Let me first move to a comment which is received from one of the participants. It notes we are looking for Indian partners for textile production and application based on sheep wool. So I think the question being asked is that how can MISSP assist the company in this matter? So I'll ask Mr. Tarun Gupta from TNA Consulting to please respond to it.
I think one of the key aspects of MISSP program is to help companies who are at a similar stage of evaluation of India market entry. And quite often we've seen evaluating an Indian partner is a key aspect to begin with India entry. And under the MISSP program, subsequent to this event, we would be happy to engage on a one-on-one discussion wherein we can share more details about the agro-textile cluster in India, and thereafter work on a formal program to help them identify potential partner in line with the criteria identified by the Swiss company. And we do understand that initially it may look at whether sourcing or eventual production. I think all these factors may need to be considered. The only comment I would make on agro textiles is that this has been a big focus area of the government because India is a good source of a lot of raw material, and what we have lacked is the intermediary process. And that's where a potential partnership with Swiss company could be a win-win, both for the Indian company as well as for the Swiss partner.
Question on this about marketing of air conditioning applications and marketing of air conditioning applications in India. So how MISSP can be of assistance to this?
Not being fully familiar with the context, but I'll just try to take a stab at it. See, air conditioning applications, today I would break it up into two categories. One is on the institutional segment, which is meant for offices, whether it's hospitals, whether it's schools, colleges, yeah. And second is into private sector. Now, depending on, and in India, if you keep aside last 6 months of the COVID, the whole commercial space, institutional space has been growing, and we have large number of players under the MEP, which is mechanical engineering and plumbing, who are doing HVAC applications. And this has become a critical aspect even on green rating of buildings. So not being cognizant of what the product or technology is, but if it's geared towards institution, we have a large demand because we are a tropical country, and air conditioning is a large consumer of power. So couple that with sustainability, this is something which is a growth area, and we'd be happy to understand more details about the concerned company and what could be their route to India entry.
Okay, so we'll reach out to them. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. There's a question. We also have a few Indian players who've joined us on this webinar, and there's a question from Mr. Peter Flukiger, the director of Swiss Textiles. Maybe if I could invite him to switch on his camera. The question is that what are the specific areas that Swiss companies will be looking at while analyzing collaboration with Swiss, with Indian companies. So, specific areas, given that you have a broader picture of the whole textile sector, something that you would like to reiterate, though you mentioned in your opening remarks, but something which is like a message which goes back to the Indian technical textile sector.
Would like to hand over these questions to the participants, because companies they know best what they need, because as you know the Swiss textile sector is a niche player. We have niche players in the transportation business, in the medical equipment, and they are all part of an international supply chain. So we do not have, or we just have a few vertically integrated partners. So Swiss companies are looking for sources, meaning yarns, meaning fabrics, and are interested in the huge market, in the huge Indian market, in the growing Indian market. So therefore, I can't give you a specific answer. It really depends on the companies. But what I'm interested in is with regard to the market. If I can ask you a question back, or the other colleague, how do you assess the possibility for a Swiss company or a European consortia to access a government procurement market in India? Is that possible? Are you a part of the GPA agreement? How does it work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for that, let me ask Mr. Ashwin Merchant to respond to that.
Basically, when it comes to any government tenders, today everything is online. So, there is complete transparency. The cliche image of tenders being sold out in advance is all gone. That's a thing of the past. The new India has everything, the digital India has everything online. So one just has to simply log in online, put in the details, and you can actually track each tender, the status of it day by day. It's a live 24/7 live tracking. So it is very easy for, of course, there are certain requirements which, depending on the tender, like you have to have minimum turnover, you have to have maybe in some cases local partners. When it comes to defense-related things, there is also the offset clause which has to be dealt with. So depending on that, but basically applying for any government tender, whether it's defense, whether it's railways, the whole gamut of tenders, everything is online.
You might also mention, the government has been bringing in major reforms, trying to make things seamless, faceless, painless, what Gaurav referred to was honoring the taxpayer reform, where we are honoring those who are doing their duty, those who are contributing to the nation without in an honest and transparent way. Similarly, that also goes for procurement. I mean, the government has become very transparent when it comes to procurement. Things are available online, and you can access, the companies can access the sort of requirements that Indian firms have, Indian government has. And in any case, if there's specific issues on which any of your member company would like to get assistance from us, we'll be happy to facilitate that in terms of MISSP, or otherwise, as an embassy, as per procedure, what we can assist you with. Maybe I can also ask Mr. Gupta to add to this whole discussion from his perspective, from the overall perspective.
I would just want to add that apart from the whole digitization, transparency, and in certain cases, what Mr. Merchant mentioned, need for local sourcing and offset, we have to just keep two factors in mind for government procurement as well. One is, of course, a lot of it would be L1, so price competitiveness remains a key factor. And that in turn may determine that some of the assembly or some of the production may be required to do in India because price competitiveness has been a challenge. And as long as we are aware of that, that factor needs to be taken into account, and maybe slightly longer lead time. So because sometimes in the past we've seen companies being disappointed on the lead time, but we do have to factor in that lead time and price competitiveness are two key important aspects.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Now, we are already short time, but still, there were a few questions. One of them, which was mentioned earlier, also was India after TEPA. So I can, I was one of the panelists during the India after TEPA panel discussion, which happened day before yesterday during the AGM of Swiss Indian Chamber of Commerce. We had the Honorable Federal Councillor of Switzerland, Mr. Uli Maurer, His Excellency Mr. Uli Maurer was there. And there were many Swiss parliamentarians who were there. It was a large crowd of, I can say, even this COVID time, of more than 100 plus people. So there was tremendous interest. I mean, there was a huge business representation. And, the overall message which we got was that the industry, every stakeholder is looking forward to an early conclusion of this FTA. There are so many complementarities which are existing and which can be tapped, which just require, this conclusion of this FTA to initiate. And that message was very well conveyed, by the participants to the governments, by the governments, that they are indeed working on it, and there is a regular exchange of discussions which is happening. I can tell you that it is happening at the highest level between the two governments. There's significant priority which is being given to this agreement by the Indian government as well as by the Swiss government. Yeah, we are hopeful that we should be able to reach a mutually sort of acceptable solution, and we will certainly reach. So with those words, now let me come to the conclusion of this webinar. On behalf of the embassy, on behalf of our knowledge partner, legal tax partner teams, on behalf of the Swiss Textiles, which is with us today, and thanking them for their cooperation and collaboration. I would also like to thank the audience which has joined us today for this webinar. I hope that we have been able to reinforce the fact that there are tremendous complementarities, even in sectors which are very niche for Swiss industry, like the technical textiles, and where we can further cooperate and collaborate in terms of strengthening the India-Switzerland commercial linkages. And such sort of collaborations will further go into increasing the reasons why we should have an India-FTA TEPA and a free trade agreement. And yeah, so with those words, thank you for joining us. We will be having this whole webinar uploaded on our website as a video cast, and we look forward to greater collaboration between India and Switzerland in the field of technical textiles. Thank you. Have a nice day ahead.